Everyone knows the MiG-21 was the Soviet Union's most exported jet fighter, but few realize that the U.S. Air Force had already mastered its weaknesses long before any American pilot was supposed to face one in combat. Inside a remote Nevada range, F-5 pilots were flying mock wars against real MiG-21s, analyzing their throttle response, turn rate, and blind spot geometry down to the knot. The Air Force called it Operation Constant Peg, and it rewrote every assumption about Eastern Bloc air power without a single press release. Most people assumed Soviet aircraft never touched American soil during the Cold War. Yet by the end of the 1960s, real MiG-21Fs were flying under U.S. control over the Nevada desert. The shift wasn't born from curiosity. It came out of combat necessity. In Southeast Asia, small delta-wing interceptors had repeatedly outturned or out-accelerated U.S. fighters that were heavier and more dependent on radar guidance. American pilots knew the silhouette of a MiG from intelligence briefings, but they had no empirical sense of how it behaved on the edge of a stall, or how quickly it could recover energy after a sharp break. That lack of first-hand data created a tactical blind spot. The Defense Department needed hard numbers, not theoretical models, and that meant securing an intact aircraft. But acquiring one risked diplomatic chaos. Any overt operation could have been read as theft of Soviet hardware. So, technical intelligence specialists worked through Allied channels where the aircraft already existed. Two opportunities emerged almost by accident. In 1966, a MiG-21 defected from Iraq to Israel, landing intact and therefore available for close inspection. Later, Indonesia's post-Sukarno military realignment left several Soviet designs grounded and under uncertain ownership, creating another potential source. From these openings, U.S. agencies quietly negotiated access, piece by piece, under conditions that publicly remained invisible. The Air Force designated the subsequent test effort under the code names Have Donut and Have Drill. These were cover programs that made the activity sound like minor radar evaluations rather than full-scale exploitation of a frontline interceptor. The aircraft was flown under extraordinary secrecy. Its serial data plates were removed, manuals translated, and instrument panels relabeled so that they could pass casual inspection at Nellis. Spare parts came indirectly through European intermediaries, posing as aeronautical research firms. Even the technicians had to sign classified non-disclosure agreements specific to each subsystem they touched. Flight testing began with basic envelope exploration. Pilots measured acceleration rates, control stiffness, and fuel flow across altitude bands. Aerodynamically, the MiG-21's simple intake cone and light wing loading demanded skills remarkably similar to the F-5, which itself had been designed for reliability and agility rather than brute power. Because of that shared simplicity, pilots transitioning from F-5 squadrons could fly the MiG with only a short familiarization course. They quickly discovered its strengths, rapid climb, instantaneous roll response, and its weaknesses, like limited endurance and a tendency to lose energy during tight maneuvers. Every hour logged fed directly into updated performance charts. For the first time, simulator and classroom exercises were built around authentic data curves rather than guesses. By the time the Air Force conceived its clandestine training enterprise called Constant Peg, these aircraft were ready to serve as live opponents. The evaluation had stripped away myth and replaced it with direct knowledge. U.S. pilots were no longer theorizing how a MiG fought. They had already flown one, and they knew exactly where its limits began to show. That expertise became the foundation for the tactics that F-5 pilots would soon refine against America's newest jet generation. A single red star on the tail could make or break a pilot's ego, because behind it flew men trained to simulate the enemy better than any simulator could. The aircraft looked foreign, sounded foreign, and were operated by Americans whose job depended on convincing their own side that they were the adversary. This was the domain of the 4477th Test and Evaluation Squadron, known informally as the Red Eagles, formed under Air Force Systems Command during the latter part of the 1970s. The unit served as the operational result of those earlier exploitation programs and operated from a discrete corner of Nellis Air Force Base, where hangars concealed aircraft that officially did not exist. Its purpose was precise rather than symbolic. Pilots selected for the squadron were combat qualified, but were retrained to think and fly according to Soviet doctrine. They studied translated flight manuals, air combat regulations, and tactics derived from intelligence intercepts. Each sortie had to replicate how an Eastern pilot would approach, defend, or disengage from a fight. Yet the paradox remained. They were representing a nation their own command structure insisted they had never fought. The secrecy extended so deeply that even neighboring squadrons were unaware of who these pilots were or what they flew each morning over the Nevada test and training range. Procedurally, Red Eagle flights were logged under neutral call signs. Radio traffic followed standardized phrases designed to reveal nothing to curious scanners. Their MiG-21 F-13s carried authentic Soviet paint, cockpit markings in Cyrillic, and red instrument backlighting. Even the flight line used canvas covers during maintenance to obscure airframe details from aerial reconnaissance. Weapons were carried, but never loaded with live ordnance. Every engagement used visual cues to register simulated kills. The result was a training environment with a realism unmatched by any simulator or projection system of that era. Performance comparisons between the MiG-21 and the familiar F-5E Tiger II highlighted narrow but decisive aerodynamic contrasts. Both aircraft shared similar thrust-to-weight ratios, but the MiG burned more fuel per minute and lost energy faster in sustained turns. Instructors reported that its engine produced abrupt compressor stalls at high angles of attack and demanded careful throttle transitions. Rearward visibility was restricted by the heavy canopy framing, yet the airframe's climb rate and roll acceleration at low altitude were remarkably effective. F-5 pilots who encountered the Red Eagles learned to anticipate those brief windows where the MiG's limited energy retention forced it toward defensive maneuvers. Through controlled engagements against emerging U.S. fighters, first the F-15 and later the F-16, the Red Eagles compiled detailed data on counter-maneuver tactics. Those results informed the developing doctrine of dissimilar air combat training, which quietly standardized many techniques without crediting their origin. Participants in programs like Red Flag or Constant Peg built strategies shaped entirely by that hidden syllabus. By the early 1980s, tactical manuals reflected lessons written in secrecy. How to draw a MiG into climbing too steeply, or to attack when its delta wing lost lift during sustained turns. The work of the Red Eagles had turned secrecy into structure, transforming confidential analysis into operational knowledge that soon appeared, quietly, on real combat flight lines and in encounters that were never officially recorded. Decades later, analysts reviewing declassified radar archives began noticing a pattern. In several air-to-air engagements recorded across remote theaters, U.S.-linked aircraft performed turns, energy recoveries, and overshoot counters that precisely matched tactics once confined to the covert training syllabi at Nellis. These were moves that could not have been improvised. They reflected prior exposure to how a MiG-21 bled speed when pushed past its ideal corner velocity. The evidence was circumstantial, yet technically specific. Time-sliced data that corresponded point for point with Red Eagle training profiles. Following the Vietnam era, a number of American-built F-5 squadrons were transferred or loaded to partner nations. Many of these deployments occurred under joint command structures in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Pacific Rim. The aircraft routinely flew defense intercept and border patrol missions, where Soviet-supplied fighters were common across national lines. Officially, these units operated under local markings, but many pilots had trained in U.S. programs, including Red Flag rotations. Their performance reports began showing the same vocabulary of tactics: vertical rolling scissors, delayed turn entries, and positional reversals that mirrored techniques developed from the MiG evaluations. Publicly, the record lists no direct F-5 versus MiG-21 encounters, yet mission debriefs collected from Allied air forces hint at brief, unacknowledged clashes. Certain radar traces show two small fighters executing mirrored maneuvers at subsonic speed before one rapidly disengaged below detection altitude. Recoveries of downed ordnance or engine fragments from these incidents later matched manual serial patterns unique to the export MiG-21 F series. Statistically, those matches are rare outliers unless actual air combat had taken place. It was through these fragments that historians inferred what official logs omitted. The flight mechanics aligned closely with the Red Eagle's earlier findings. Analysts could distinguish the signature of an F-5 pilot exploiting the MiG structural limitations, forcing it above Mach 0.9, where its instantaneous turn rate deteriorated, or initiating climbs to altitudes that exposed its marginal acceleration reserve. The advantage was methodical. It came from knowing the exact energy limits of the opponent rather than relying on instinct. Those familiar with both aircraft recognized that such control precision did not arise from theory, but from practice inside restricted test ranges. Maintaining silence about these exchanges served diplomatic necessity. Any admission risked revealing the existence of constant peg and compromising nations that had loaned their aircraft for intelligence evaluation. The deniability preserved strategic relationships, while the knowledge moved quietly through technical channels. Manuals circulated under generic titles, summarizing adversary performance data, yet the page structures mirrored the Red Eagle's internal guides almost verbatim. Several neutral training zones, notably those shared by partner air forces equipped with both F-5s and MiG-21s, became unrecorded laboratories where each aircraft's limits were explored under the cover of exercises. The lessons traveled faster than their origins could be traced. Pilots who had once flown classified sorties found themselves encountering the same enemy silhouettes abroad, responding through reflexive precision that revealed prior familiarity. Those engagements confirmed that the combat readiness developed in secrecy had preceded the history that later tried to describe it. Mastery of the MiG-21 wasn't an accidental achievement of the late Cold War. It was the outcome of planned engineering secrecy decades earlier. Inside those desert hangars, the U.S. quietly rewrote the limits of an aircraft the world saw as an enigma. Every evaluation flight, every training sortie became a calculated offset to an opponent's belief in its own superiority. It leaves one question: how much of what we call history is actually declassified truth, and how much remains hidden behind operational cover names? Constant Peg's legacy still shapes modern aggressor training, the same methods continuing under different paint and quieter headlines.